What's up? My name is Ryan Tansom. I am the founder of the Independence by Design ownership operating system. I've been working on this for 10 years since selling the family business. If you want to know more about me, check out my story here. And in this video, I'm going to give you an overview of the operating system to make it easier for you to understand how to consume the content that's out on my newsletter, as well as YouTube and the podcast, to hopefully give you some clarity and a path forward. So all of this material boils down to, I believe that as a founder of an owner and as an owner, we want independence. And my definition of independence is a business that gives you the freedom of time and money, regardless of whether you decide to scale the company, step back into the boardroom, or sell the company. And it's about keeping alignment so that way you don't sacrifice the things that are most important to you. And I think the biggest thing holding us back from that independence is this thing I call the owner operator trap. And this owner operator trap is a result of, if we're down here and we want to reach our independence up here and have that complete freedom of our time, cash flow, and wealth, regardless of what we decide to do, we have this entire jumbled up mess of juggling payroll, we're juggling reinvestment decisions, we're juggling taxes, we're juggling employment issues, supply chain issues, pricing, and market. You name the challenge that comes with running a business. And the realization that I've had after the hundreds of podcasts and the 10 years in multiple companies is we have a challenge because our cash flow and our time are coupled together. They're all commingled. So someone says, why don't you just go hire an integrator? Well, they're $250,000, and that goes against my lifestyle, and I don't understand the trade-offs of everything that I've got going on right now. So we've got our time and our cash flow that are coupled together, and then we've got our wealth that's locked up in this business. How much is the company worth? If I do these things, will it grow more value? What would it be worth if I went this path or the other path? And all of this creates a just ball of anxiety and a cloudy mess. And what we do is we just grow revenue and we hope it all works out, because the more revenue, hopefully we'll eventually have cash in the bank and we'll eventually have more freedom and time. However, there are three forces that keep this dynamic stuck in play regardless of the size of the company. I mean, I work with people that are doing 200 million bucks, same situation, and people that are doing a couple million. We all have this owner operator trap because it's our personal life and our business commingled into one. And here's how I've mapped it together, because we're trying to decouple our time and cash flow while having a line of sight to our wealth. And the three forces that keep this dynamic in play are, we're making gut-based decisions. It's difficult to understand if we're making progress or not. If we hire this, a C-level suite executive, or if we put in this accounting system and ERP system, we launch a location, what's the impact on my time, cash flow, and wealth? So we're generally just hoping. And when I say hoping, I mean, there's a lot of gut instincts that go in that are very valid, but we want clear visibility on the numbers. We have also unpredictable cash flow. If we invest and do these things, what will be my cash in the bank account? How does it impact my taxes, my debt, my working capital? And God forbid, I've got a line of sight in my ownership distributions outside of my W-2 income. And the last force of the owner operator trap is those gut-based decisions and unpredictable cash flow lead us to being stuck in our job and stuck in the operations, firefighting, and just holding it all together. And that is what I call the owner operator trap. And this is really important because the owner operator is who I'm talking to. That if that's you, you're in the right spot, because all of these decisions are commingled into your family, your personal life, your cash flow, your wealth, your identity, your happiness, your job. I mean, all of this is all commingled. And I've spent over a decade just trying to map out, okay, how does this all work? So that way, if we were to make a decision, how do we make sure that we can see the through line all the way to independence? I completely and 100% believe, from my own experience and working with a lot of owner operators, we can get there. We just have to use our constraints appropriately. One of the graphics that a lot of people that I work with resonate with is, here we go at the gut-based unpredictable cash flow and stuck in operations. But if we look at an org chart, here's what we've got going on. We have the CEO, which is running the organization. And well, let me back up. You, as the owner operator, are sitting and hovering above each of the functions of a company. And what I mean by functions, and that these functions tie into a lot of the operating system. The CEO is responsible for all of operations to get it to ownership's goals. Revenue is all of sales and revenue. Gross profit and gross margins are after the cost of goods. And cash is cash is real cash, and we'll get into a lot of that in the operating system. But net income and normalized EBITDA, those three functions, whether you have an actual warm body in that seat, you might have someone in each of these spots, or maybe they're not the right person either. Like the two challenges I see with this is people get so exhausted because they're owning the outcome, even if you have a warm body in that spot. So our goal is to move from operator to owner. So you want to be sitting in the boardroom as the owner. You might also be the CEO, and we want to build out a leadership team that has the complete owning of the outcome of revenue, gross profit margins, and cash. Completely possible. I mean, this is how private equity firms run their business. They don't go in and have a job. They go buy the company with debt and equity, and then how other people do the execution. And the ownership operating system is all about how to extract yourself out of the operations, to sit in the boardroom, to have as many choices as you possibly can have while managing the constraints of time, cash flow, and wealth. That is why I mean, it took me over a decade to realize that there was this gaping hole where there's the operator over here. To really label what that operator does is you're working in the business. It's like the first time I'm like, that's actually what this means is you have a W-2 income, which is your salary, and you're trading time for money. And the operator of a business gets a paycheck every other week. Hopefully it's market wage, and it's responsible for operational execution towards ownership's goals. Private equity is different than venture capital, is different than employee ownership, is different than public companies. And every single company has a mandate over their cash flow and their valuation and in what timeline. And operations goals are to the operator's goals execute against the cash flow and valuation. Otherwise, you're fired. As an owner operator, we are responsible for coming up with those goals. And so the owner is the working on the business. And we've talked about that. Oh, that's not working there. What's going on here? We'll do the white. That's actually what it means to be on the business. Owners of assets are concerned about, should I reinvest the cash flow into the asset to grow equity valuation, or should I take distributions out? The more distributions you take out, the more cash flow you take out, you're suffocating the potential equity growth of the company. That's okay, but that's why we have to look at the equity growth and valuation and in what timeline in order to get a framework to say, well, should I take a few $100,000 out this year, or should I reinvest for equity growth? Depends on what your wealth targets are and the valuation targets are, and depends on what your lifestyle requirements are, or your diversification desires. That's got to be taken into consideration. This is the base layer of what it means to be an owner operator. And to not talk about this and to just jump into strategic planning or jump into operating systems like your VTO with EOS and not think about the base layer of what you want out of your time, your cash flow, and your equity as an owner is insane to me. We're all just making stuff up otherwise. That is why I have created the ownership operating system. Oh, let's go with black again here. So the ownership operating system, which I call independence by design. And it sits on top of the other business operating systems. You might be running EOS or scaling up or OKRs or the great game of business. All of those are great. I love them for execution. But the definition of an operating system, like I have a Mac, I have to know what the hell I want when I sit down. So if you don't know what you want out of your time, cash flow, wealth, and your goals, and in what timeline, there's that quote from Alice in Wonderland: if you don't know where you're going, any route will do. And that is what creates so much stress and anxiety and ambiguity, because you're making gut-based decisions with unpredictable cash flow and you're stuck in operations because you're not pegged to some clearly articulated goal. That is the Independence by Design ownership operating system. I am 100% a believer that you can create independence and free yourself up from the day to day. You can decouple your time and your cash flow and have the option to scale, or grow through acquisition, whatever kind of scaling you want, step back from the operations in the boardroom or sell the business without impacting and taking a step back. I mean, after 450 podcasts, I mean, most people, they sell their company and they regret it because they didn't realize what they were solving for and they only focused on the money or they got taken advantage. I mean, so many different things. The way to think about the constraints within a goal, the moment we come up with our goal of time, cash flow, and wealth, we can look at the constraints. And so I'll show you that in a second and then I'll wrap up. So I think independence, escape, velocity. Actually, before I go here, I'm gonna reground us. So this is what it looks like with the through line. So the through line of taking that whole crazy mess of decoupling our cash flow from our time while having a line of sight on our wealth so we can hit that independence and do whatever we want, we have to use our constraints correctly of our time, cash flow, and wealth. So that way, if you ever read the book, The Goal, I love it. It's all about constantly opening up the bottleneck. So I've created an entire operating system that has 3 phases: plan, build, and elevate, that allow us to use our constraints appropriately. So that way you're always making progress and you can always see the through line in order to actually ring the bell of what I call independence escape velocity. So I'll go back to that framework in a sec. So the independence escape velocity is total freedom. Like you can sell the business, all of it, some of it, none of it, and it doesn't impact your goal. It doesn't impact what you need to manage your life and actually be happy. And so it's the moment. So I've got clients right now where they don't have a job. They got a CEO. They're collecting all their cash flow from distributions, and they can sell some or all of it, and it doesn't impact what they want. Total optionality, and it gives me so much joy because I think you should be rewarded for the hard work that you have put in and growing and taking the risk of having the business. So the theory of constraints in the book, The Goal, talks about we are constantly opening up our bottleneck. And I heard this quote from Elon's book where physics is the ultimate first principles. Everything else is a guideline. And that's how I think about the first principles of time, cash flow, and wealth, where we want to spend our time working. And when we do that, we are generating cash flow. So we spend our time working to generate cash flow. And then we want to take that cash flow and invest into wealth generating assets, mainly your company. God bless America. We can take our time and our investments and grow a valuable company if we understand the ownership operating system and how valuations work and how our decisions impact our time, cash flow, and wealth. Or do you want to reinvest outside the company? There's no wrong answer here as long as we're pegging it against your goal. We take that wealth, and the purpose of wealth is a store of value to generate income that's not tied to our time. So this is a flywheel. We want to constantly make sure that all of our decisions are cranking this flywheel. Every single decision that I've come across, and this is why I landed on the first principles, is going to have a trade-off of one of these 3 levers. I believe that once we have our goal and then we have our investment of time or cash flow or wealth, it brings meaning to the sacrifice and the investment that we're making, which makes life a game and a lot of fun. Every entrepreneur and owner operator I've met is totally comfortable doing hard work, which is why you're here and taking risks. But a lot of times that stress and anxiety comes from the fact that we don't know if we're making progress or not, and we don't know the implications of our decisions. But if we have a framework like this, we say, okay, well, I've literally just got a text from one of my clients spending a ton of time working on interviewing a CEO right now, working on making sure that their annual budget with the 3 statement model is built out. So that way, when they hire the CEO, they can maintain their cash flow and wealth, but they're going to be buying back their time. So spending a lot of time right now to then get out of the operations that CEO is going to be 200-300 grand, and it's going to reduce the cash flow, but it sure as hell will grow the valuation of the company, which frees up time. So we're cranking this flywheel, but one of our, you could choose to suck a lot of the cash out of the company, but you're going to be sacrificing some wealth. No right or wrong answer, but we got to peg it against your goals. And there is a way to have the through line of all of the things that you have to work on and all the decisions that you have. So I'm going to come back to that in a second because I want to show you this. This is what I mean by the goals. So if we were to double click that flywheel, say, okay, how does this actually work in practice? We have our time. A lot of times that time is coming from your operational role. Hopefully you're getting paid market wage, and every 2 weeks when you get your paycheck, you traded time for money. But what we want to do is increase our distributions from ownership over time. So there's I'd say a good chunk of my clients that they want to make 25 to 50 grand a month in free cash flow after working capital, debt, and taxes, and not their salaries. Like, that's true distributions coming from the valuation of their asset from their business. And we can have an entire model on, like, that's the whole point of this operating system, is getting visibility of how do we actually do that, instead of, oh, this is a great theory. Like, no, it's all going to come back down to cash flow statement and good decision making, and then rolling that through the operations. But if we over time generate cash flow from distributions while growing the valuation of our company, then we can kind of give you an idea here. So if we want to go from 60 hours a week to 10 hours a week, we want to take our cash flow from 400 grand, and maybe half of that's coming from salary and the other half's coming from distribution, but we want to go to 600 grand only from distributions. And we want our wealth to go from $5 million, including the valuation of the company, which, if you know the valuation of your company, you're in the single digit percentile, and not just some made up BS valuation, but an actual one. And we want to go to 20 million bucks. And we want to do this by 2030. How do we do it? What are our trade-offs? This frames everything else up. And then what we can do is say, how do we get there? What do I need to do today? What order do I need to do things in? I can't do it all at once. And if we understand the ownership operating system, we can then push down these objectives through the operations. And so what we have here is 3 phases, and each phase is an antidote to the ownership, the owner operator trap. So we want to plan for the future, and that is the way of overcoming the gut-based decision. So ownership goals and the understanding valuations and the ownership operating system playbook. We want to build a valuable business so we can get rid of the unpredictable cash flow. And then we want to elevate from operator to owner. And sorry, I'm going a little out of order here. And if you want to download the PDF, you can just click the link below and put in your email address, and you'll get the PDF so you can have this at your disposal. And by the way, all of the content that I'm creating is hanging on these different modules. So what we have here in the ownership operating system in these 3 phases, so we have plan. So we have ownership goals. We want to define your owner's North Star of your time, cash flow, and wealth goals. We've got a tool called the owner's scorecard that is allowing you to see and clearly measure and track over the current to 5-year target of your time, cash flow, and wealth goals. Then we expand our knowledge, and we need to understand the game of ownership. The only way to really get good at this game of ownership is to become a capital allocator, and we have to understand how valuations work. I would say the majority of my time over the last 10 years learning so much about business valuations and what's the different context, and I've got this framework that I created called the 3 lenses of valuations: the owner's utility lens on how to actually engineer your time and cash flow and wealth while you own the company. Lens 2 is the market valuation of normalized EBITDA, the multiple, net debt, working capital that you can measure and monitor regardless of the buyer. So you can always at least know what is your company worth on an annual basis. And then there's the 3rd lens, which is the strategic transaction value, which is if you were to get an out of the blue offer, what's the deal structure from cash, seller's note, escrow, earnouts, etc., and how does it impact your time, wealth, and cash flow goals? Then the last module in the plan is the owner's playbook, where I've got a bunch of tools that I created, the owner's North Star, which is a kind of like, think about it like the owner's VTO, but using all of the concepts that we have here. So it's not a VTO. So for trademark and copyright purposes, it's very, very different from that, but it's your one document that you can go, okay, here's the North Star that I'm working on. I've got something called the owner's roadmap, which is an assessment based on all of the modules and milestones in the operating system. So you can get a score out of 81. You can go, okay, here's what I need to work on for my 90-day game plan. And I've got a 90-day game plan document that makes sure that every single quarter you're working on the right ownership project. And then we've got a rhythm of monthly, quarterly, and annual owners meetings, and essentially effectively the boardroom blueprint and playbook. Then we move into the build phase. So if you think about, that's the core foundation, and that's the core foundation behind the 90-day boardroom blueprint, which is the onboarding into the ownership operating system. Because after that, you're like, holy shit, I got a plan. I know what I want. I've got an actual execution. So we're taking the ideas, clarification of your goals, and then we're rolling it down into execution. So that way you can continue to have that acceleration and build that momentum of the flywheel. Then the build is the building out that valuable business through creating predictable cash flow. We want to build out a 3-statement financial forecast. So a full financial model that is a reliable financial dashboard so you can see all the trade-offs of your decisions. We want to then have predictable revenue. So we want to generate predictable revenue on that income statement every single month and every single year. And there's 3 milestones inside of the predictable revenue. And then we want to have transferable margins where we have gross margins that are holding true and are able to scale as we continue to grow. Then that allows us to elevate up from the operations to the ownership boardroom. We got to build out a set of C-suite, which includes those 3 functional leaders: sales, operations, and finance. And then we need to tie an incentive plan, an annual incentive plan, to those 3 people and functions, and then tie it also to the short term and then the long-term valuation targets and the KPIs. And then it becomes the psychological journey of like, when and how do you want to decouple your identity and actually hire a CEO? That allows you to get to this total escape velocity. I mean, I got clients that are sitting in the boardroom and they're just clipping along. We're having our monthly, quarterly, and annual planning, and they have other people running the business and they can do whatever they want. That's what I want for you. And because if you want to stay in the business, you love the culture, the employees, the legacy, a large percent of my, the people that I work with will end up eventually doing an internal transition or an ESOP or something like that. Doesn't mean you have to, but it just allows us, as we're generating income and wealth, like the machine ends up becoming, people want to just have a good relationship with their business and their culture and their people. It just brings me a lot of joy for the value that can be created. All right. Last couple things before we wrap up here is I want you to think through, what the hell do you want and in what timeline? What is your time, cash flow, and wealth goals? And I want you to take a moment. And if there's one to 2 outcomes I want from this video, is getting you to realize that it's time to act. And there is an actual operating system that allows you to grab onto these ideas and concepts to start making progress. And I call it the alignment score, because we can't get to our goals tomorrow. Like, that would be great, but there is no free lunch. And life is a series of sacrifices and trade-offs, and it's a game we can design. But if we have our goals clear and you say, okay, well, this is my goals over 2030, how do I get there? And I want to know, how clear is your path? Because I think that this is the root of most anxieties. People just don't have a clear path because they're making gut-based decisions with unpredictable cash flow, and they're stuck in the operations. So you say, okay, well, I don't have a clear path on my time. You know what? My wealth, I might have a slightly better understanding of that. I would argue that most people have no idea what their company's worth and literally don't, single digit, if not to the right of the decimal point, have a clear line of sight to the actual valuation that they're going to want at a point in time in the future. And cash flow is usually very murky because it's top line revenue, gross profit, net income. Hopefully there will be cash in the checking account in a couple months. If we want to flip that, what I know is possible is I have a complete line of sight of when I can actually buy my time back from my, hire people to replace me. I can continue making my 30 to 50 grand a month in ownership distributions. And I also know that if we accomplish this with the company, my company valuation will be worth 21 million, because it's going to take, $4 million normalized EBITDA times six or seven. The way to get started after you realize that there's a gap there is jump into the ownership assessment. Again, you can download all these in the PDF using the link below. And there, I have an entire roadmap on each of these phases and each of these modules. And then in each of those phases and modules, each module will have 3 milestones, and that's the full ownership roadmap. I don't want to overdo it right now for you. I want you to start thinking about the most important things, which is, have you clarified your time, cash flow, and wealth goals and documented them as measurable targets? Give yourself a score. We're just trying to take a gut check here. Have you completed valuations through 3 lenses? Do you know what the discounted cash flow valuation is, the market valuation, and the strategic? Probably not if you're listening to this. I've got a lot of material on that. Anyways, we've got the ownership roadmap, 90-day game plan. There's probably going to be a lot of red here, which is fine. The goal is I want to show you that there's a path and there's a roadmap and an operating system that hopefully for the first time allows you to say, okay, well, let's say I'm not looking good. You go, well, what do I got to do first? What you got to do first is think about what you want. I know it sounds ridiculous, but like everything starts with a goal. The world orients around around that goal, and that goal will help you see your constraints. And then we want to build a plan so you can understand the trade-offs of those goals, of those decisions. Sorry. Out of this, you'll get a score out of 27. And what I would recommend is just follow along. I've got, this is going to be the first video of a lot. My goal is to provide a lot of free material because I've got a coaching business and I want people to pay for access, accountability, and some of the elevated tools, but the education, the content, and the resources I want to keep pushing out for free. I heard a quote from a program that I'm in that I hope, and one of my missions is that my content and my educational stuff that I give away for free will impact more lives than the people that pay for the coaching program. And so if you are interested in the coaching program, you can check out the website, and I've got a group coaching program. I've got one-on-ones as well, but those are actually shut down because I've got it booked out. But a lot of stuff that we can do, and there's a lot of material, and there's a path forward. You can't do it all at once, but the first thing to get started is fill out your ownership assessment, fill out your alignment score, and then start consuming content that's related to helping you go through the assessment. Go, I got to figure out what my goals are. And where I've seen a lot of people find a lot of value is start learning how valuations work. It's really difficult to understand if you're on track or off track if you have no idea how the hell valuations work. And I've spent a decade trying to demystify them so that way you're not just listening to some dude or gal in a suit explaining to you a bunch of technical stuff. At the end of the day, you're going like, okay, how much cash do I got? And if I do all this stuff, if I generate more cash, how does it impact the valuation? My goal is to break it down in a little bit more easy language for you, following some educational style approach like the whiteboarding that I'm doing here. So hope you found this helpful. As you can tell, I got lots of energy and I enjoy this a lot. And so follow along, sign up to the newsletter, and subscribe to the podcast if you enjoy this. See ya.